The Keeper's Dwelling, now the St. Simon's Island Lighthouse Museum, is a two-story brick structure built in 1872. Designed by noted architect Charles B. Kluske, it's a building that stands today essentially unaltered from its original appearance when completed. It is an outstanding example of mid-Victorian, romantic, eclectic architecture. Directly adjacent to it, the St. Simon's Island Lighthouse guards the entrance to St. Simon's Sound and Brunswick Harbor, an important fishing and import-export Georgia port. Plans for the lighthouse and Keeper's Dwelling were drawn under the direction of Brigadier General O.M. Poe in 1867. The construction contract, dated November 20th, 1868, was given to Charles B. Kluske, who was responsible for many outstanding buildings in Georgia, such as the first state capitol in Milledgeville. A native of Ireland, Kluske worked in Georgia between 1830 and 1847, designing Greek Revival buildings. The two-story brick Keeper's Dwelling is currently the oldest brick structure in Glynn County. It combines a Gothic Revival roof with an Italianate bracketed cornice and paired gable windows, enhanced by Italianate drip arches. A one-story porch completes the main facade. On the north side, an outside stairway once led to the second-story balcony. This was removed in the 1970s. The first floor of the building contains an 8-foot entrance hall running the length of the building. As you enter through the front door, the museum gallery to your left features the exhibition The History of St. Simon's Light and the Golden Isles. On October 17, 1804, John Cooper, a plantation owner on St. Simon's Island, deeded 4 acres of his land to the federal government for the construction of a lighthouse. James Gould of Massachusetts was hired in 1807 to build the lighthouse, as well as a one-story frame residence. Original specifications called for the lighthouse to be built of hard brick. However, for economic purposes, the material used in the majority of the construction was tabby, a mixture of oyster shell, lime, sand, and water. The uppermost part, about 12.5 feet, was constructed of the best northward brick. The 75-foot tower, exclusive of the lantern, was an octagonal pyramid. It was 25 feet in diameter at the base, tapering to 10 feet at the top. The foundation was 8 feet thick. An iron lantern 10 feet high and 8 feet in diameter rested on top of the tower, and oil lamps were suspended on iron chains. Appointed by President James Madison in May 1810 as the first keeper, James Gould held this position at an annual salary of $400 until his retirement in 1837. Two decades later, in 1857, a third-order double-convex Fresnel lens was installed that greatly improved the lighthouse power and range. During the war between the states, the Macon artillery troops and 6 field guns were stationed at Fort Brown, located at the present lighthouse site, to protect St. Simon's Sound. During the war, the Confederates destroyed Gould's lighthouse so Union troops would not be able to use it as a navigational aid. For the next 10 years, Retreat Plantation's cotton barn served as a navigational reference for ships entering the Brunswick Harbor. The ruins of the first lighthouse were partially excavated by archaeologists during August of 1974. James Gould probably built a frame house to serve as a home for the lighthouse keeper and his family. The site of that dwelling remains undiscovered. In 1872, the U.S. government ordered the construction of a second lighthouse to be placed west of the first, the present-day lighthouse. Unfortunately, Kluske and some of the building crew died of malaria in 1871, a year before the structures were completed. Official records of the lighthouse stated that in 1874, this station is very unhealthy, and it's attributed to the stagnant water in several ponds in the vicinity. In 1876, the U.S. lighthouse establishment performed a thorough overhauling at the lighthouse. Workers weatherproofed the walls and the roof of the dwelling and installed a speaking tube which ran from the watchroom in the tower to the house. The dwelling housed both the keeper and the assistant keeper's families, the keeper living downstairs and his assistant upstairs. A central stairway connected the two households. A tower room connected the keeper's dwelling to the tower. Tempers flared one Sunday morning in March 1880 between the head keeper and his assistant. The resulting argument left the keeper, Frederick Osborne, dead. Legend claims that his footsteps in the tower have been heard by the wives of later keepers. Around 1910, the dwelling was altered into two separate apartments by removing the central staircase. An exterior stairway, stoop, and door were added on the north side, giving access to the second floor. These steps and stoop were removed, the doorway rebricked, and the central stairway was rebuilt during the 1975 rehabilitation. Today, the second floor features the assistant keeper's apartment as it might have appeared between 1872, when the lighthouse first opened, and 1900. In 1890, a fireproof brick oil house was constructed beside the lighthouse. The 9 by 11-foot building could hold 450 5-gallon oil cans. The lighthouse kerosene lamp was replaced by electricity in 1934. On June 1, 1939, the lighthouse was placed under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Coast Guard. One of the most important aspects of the lighthouse is the light that emanates from the tower. The light tower warns the mariner of danger and tells him where he is along the coast. As you enter the lighthouse for your 129-step climb to the top, you'll trace the keeper's daily routine as he tended the light. As trade developed in a specific area, lighthouses began to be constructed in those areas. Georgia's lighthouses date back to the colonial days. For example, the lighthouse on Tybee Island traces its roots well back into the 18th century, the early 1700s. Lighthouses assist the mariner in numerous ways. Each light has a unique flash pattern or characteristic, and where lights are very similar that are near each other, the lights are painted differently. This is called a day marking. A book published by the Coast Guard called The Light List provides a detailed description of every light along the coast, including its day markings and flash pattern. Technology has profoundly influenced lighthouse construction, particularly in the South. The earliest lighthouses are found in New England, where the early settlers developed trade and commerce. The very first lighthouse was in Boston in 1716. As trade moved down the coast, lighthouses were constructed down the coast. Early on, construction of lighthouses in the South followed construction patterns consistent with New England-type towers. But soil composition was very different, which caused problems for the builders as they searched for a base firm enough. They often had to reinforce the foundation of the tower to make it work. As you make your way from the dwelling through the tower room, you'll notice a small cast-iron door on your right at the foot of the winding staircase. There's a similar door on the fourth landing. It housed a pulley system connected to heavy weights that turned up the lens in the tower room. When you reach the top, you will see that the lantern room sits atop the tower, comprised of 3 parts: the service room, the optic section, and the dome. This area is the heart of the lighthouse. The service room was the location of the clockworks for rotation of the lens before electricity, fuel for the lamp, and the vents. Here the keeper cleaned the lamp chimneys and prepared the lantern for the coming night. The optics section is surrounded by windows called storm panes and contains the pedestal, clockworks, and the lens. The lens are cut glass, manufactured in France. They are the invention of a gentleman by the name of Augustin Fresnel and have since become known as classical lenses. Before the invention of the Fresnel lens, a lighthouse had a range of perhaps at best 5 miles. Fresnel increased that about 5-fold. The typical light can be seen about 20 to 25 miles out at sea. In the St. Simons Light, we have almost a double lens. The interior prisms remain fixed, while the 4 exterior bullseye panels rotate around the circumference of the lens. The pedestal on which the lens rests contains a clockwork system used to rotate the bullseye lens to achieve a flash effect. The St. Simons Light is operated by one 1,000 mogul lamp rotating to produce 1 beam per minute. The lens is assembled much like an erector set. There are prisms and brass fittings, and using a putty-like substance, the appropriate piece of glass is fitted into the brass. Today, in conservation, we find that these lenses have been assembled for so long, the putty has dried out, and that it is almost impossible to take one of these lenses apart without running a great risk of damaging the lens. As you look out from the gallery at the top of the lighthouse, you'll see St. Simons Sound and the buoys that mark the channel for ships on their passage to Savannah to your left, and Brunswick or Colonel's Island to the right. Directly beneath the tower, near the beach, is the Strawn Gazebo. The gazebo was built in 1910 as a water tank by the shipping magnate F.D.M. Strawn for his elegant mansion located on the southern tip of St. Simons Island to your right, past the area called the Village. The gazebo was restored by the Coastal Georgia Historical Society in 1999. Its golden roof is constructed of hand-planed cypress. When the lighthouse was fully automated by the Coast Guard in 1953, the last lighthouse keeper retired, and the passageway was taken down to separate the lighthouse from the keeper's house. At this time, the lighthouse was maintained by the Coast Guard, and the keeper's house was leased to Glynn County. The lighthouse continues under the jurisdiction of the United States Coast Guard Aids to Navigation Team in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, who check the light and lens routinely. In 1984, the Society signed a lease with the Coast Guard to allow visitors to climb to the top as part of the tour. With this lease, the Society assumed responsibility for the care and maintenance of the lighthouse, while the Coast Guard, with the help of local Coast Guard auxiliary members, continues to maintain the operational light. You are invited to join the Coastal Georgia Historical Society and help support our preservation of these important historic buildings. Membership applications are available from our docents or in the museum store. Our museum is a not-for-profit organization that is accredited by the American Association of Museums. All proceeds from the sale of items in our store, memberships, and contributions are used to further the Society's educational outreach programs and to maintain our historic structures. The Board of Directors, staff, and friends of the Coastal Georgia Historical Society and the St. Simons Island Lighthouse Museum hope you enjoy your visit to our Gem of the Coast.